Greetings, Ani, Bonjour, Kwekwe, Tansi, Scano. It's Catherine and Brian and Jennifer Godfrey of 13 Moons Lodge, and you're visiting with us on our Moonstarlodge channel, where we talk about all things cartomancy, indigenous spirituality, art, and we're diverging a little bit from the usual routine of the weekly videos because my dear friend Jennifer is visiting from British Columbia, and as another tarot and oracle aficionado, I thought it would be wonderful to do a joint video. I get questions all the time about where people can learn tarot, and I know I've been teaching it for a long time, and there's places, but there's always questions from newbies, and it's fun to go over the little peccadillos and personal ideas that we as readers have and the habits we develop. So we've mulled over some topics and going to ask each other some questions about these topics. Everything from preparation and shuffling and decks used and why and that sort of thing. So I have examples of the major styles of tarot decks on the table. I've got, this is the cutout from the Toth that I have. I have an old greenie from the early 1970s. I have a Pierre Madiney 1709 which is a Marseille deck, so Marseille is different. It's a historic deck. I have an example of the 1909 Rider-Waite-Smith, and as you will have seen from the thumbnail for the video, this deck, the Livre de Toth by Etea, who was a historic, considered one of the original fathers of esotericism, and certainly the Toth was evolved from that. And then the Marigold Tarot, which is an RWS clone, and its oracle, the Mirror Oracle, because I'm going to do a little fun thing at the end and, you know, bug Jen. Anyway, would you like to explain yourself, Jen, and 13 Moons Lodge?
Well, I am originally from Ontario, but I felt called to go west almost 3 years ago. This is my first time back to Ontario since I've been gone, and yeah, so what am I doing out there? Well, I have 13 Moons Lodge. It's a business that I created where I practice Reiki and shamanic healing, read oracle and tarot, my channel, and among other things. So yeah, you can find me on Facebook if you're interested in learning more, and it's under Jennifer Godfrey. Yeah.
Did I call you Thompson?
Nope.
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Jen. So I thought we'd cover things like gatekeeping, weird old things that people layer onto cartomancy that really have no place in cartomancy. Things like you mustn't buy used tarot, or you mustn't buy your own deck first. Somebody has to give you one. All that kind of nonsense. What's your take on that kind of thing?
I don't, I think, actually, I don't believe any of that. I think you can buy a used deck. I also think that that can be fun, especially if it's quite old, because there would be lots of energies in it. It would be magical, in my opinion. And I mean, I bought my first deck, so I don't think you have to wait for someone to give it to you, but that's my experience.
And it's mine too, because we energize and cleanse our decks. So if there was something weird on the deck, energetically at least, I mean, if somebody's got gum on the deck, it's pretty hard to, deal with that. But yeah, we energize our decks and involve them in our own ceremonies and preparation practices. So speaking of that, preparation practices, what do you do to prepare for a reading?
Oh my gosh. It depends on where I am. If I'm in like a place where there's a lot of readings and that going on, I just ground in my body. I just feel my body through my breath and connect with my heart space, and then just set the intention to connect with the person, the sitter's aura, and for their highest good. And then go from there and just really tuning into their energy. And if I'm alone, sometimes, like in my own space, sometimes I like to be a little bit more fancy, and I might burn some sage or neg champa, music. I mean, you just set the atmosphere so that it creates more of a experience for the sitter and for myself, because I do enjoy that as well.
Yeah, I think it energizes us.
Yeah.
I think one of the exercises I like is to take my deck and put it on my sternum and breathe as if I'm breathing into my body and out through my heart into the deck 4 times. And that's not necessary, as you say, but I do that based on my old shamanic training. And as a healer, I find that I connect with crystals that way. It seemed logical to connect with my decks that way. Do I do it every time? No, don't have to. If a deck has been on my table and I've been using it all week, then I am connected to it. But it's just one of those little, personal peccadillos. Do you let people touch your decks and cards?
I personally don't. I like to just keep my own energy in them. When I am reading for somebody, I do feel that their energy gets mixed into the deck anyways.
Yeah.
So I do clear the deck in, some sort of way between readings. But it's also clearing my energy, disconnecting from theirs, and so that I'm fresh and I can be a clear channel for the next person. But yeah, as far as touching the decks, I personally don't. That's not my practice.
Yeah, I don't have people touch my cards either. What about shuffling? Do you have any special shuffling practices?
Not really. It's just trying to be quick and smooth without too many dropping. But then there's something else to that too. If they're jumpers, that's a little bit different. But no specific shuffling, just
standard overhand,
yeah,
no riffle shuffling.
Yeah, nothing fancy, really basic.
Yeah, for me, I don't shuffle on camera because I have rheumatoid arthritis. My hands are quite, not as deformed as they could be, but it's very awkward for me to do it with the arthritis. So consequently, trying to riffle shuffle is awkward. Decks that are, cards this big. I mean, this is the size of the Thoth card, and a standard tarot card is hard enough, just trying to get a tarot card. So here's the Sun card from the Atea deck, and there it is by comparison. That's a big difference, and I find it very difficult. In fact, if I can get mini decks, I still don't riffle shuffle them because I think that's hard on the cardstock. And some of these are irreplaceable. Mass market decks are out there for, could be 20 years, but real old decks, or something with gilding on it, I find rough shuffling very hard to do, and I wince at it. So yeah, okay, so far we're good. Let me see what I've got here. Reversals. What do you think about reversals?
Well, as per my, just in generally reading the cards, if a reversal pops up, I don't necessarily go into the opposite meaning of it. I read more intuitively than the meanings of the cards, so I usually just feel into what it is. So it might be that it is the opposite, or it could be a combination, or there oftentimes is like multi-layers to the meaning as well. It depends on the message is for. So yeah, I would say it depends on the situation.
Yeah, for me, when I learned back in 72, and I started getting a couple of decks, like I got this Toth deck I've shown back in 72, and the next thing I got was a Rider-Waite-Smith, and then I had a bunch of very interesting oracles that long out of print now, and then I had a gap in time. So for me, reversals I had to learn them. I had to learn them because I wanted to be as good a reader as I could. Fast forward from 74, when I actually started to collect older decks, I realized that the historic decks, like the pre-1600 decks, were very different, like the Marseille deck. Different meanings. They're not read with reversals. But other historic decks seem to be read with reversals. Then in the 80s, I ran into a master reader by the name of Gail Fairfield, who has wonderful books that are still in print. And she saw reversals as meaning, the meaning was an internal to the querent.
Oh, right.
So it was an internal process nobody else would see. And that upright was sort of external and in the world. So there's that. And then I ran into cards. So I saw a lot of the cards were read as the opposite. If a card was positive, it was the negative meaning if it was reversed. And then I saw that if it was a negative card, sometimes the positive was when it was reversed. But interestingly enough, sometimes the negative cards seem to be more negative reversed. And sometimes, the positive cards were more positive cards with reverse. So I had to jump into the history, internal versus external, or intrinsic versus extrinsic, and just really get into the history of the older decks to find that. Yeah, she's an interesting, Gail Fairfield stuff, very, very, very relatable for me. It really got me reading some of the old historical writers like Uspensky and people like that had a lot to say about what the meanings are. A lot of readers don't read with reversals. They're looking at the context of the whole storyline.
Yeah.
It's interesting because when I do readings privately, and both you and I do private readings and we do online readings, I'm pulling 7 cards, typically 7 clarifiers, sometimes there's more. And if I'm doing a private reading, that reading can go on for 90 minutes to 2 hours because you're reading the whole story, with or without reversals, and you're looking at the context of cautions. Whereas on screen, when I'm doing the weekly reading, I'm trying to keep it to 20 minutes because people get bored and turn it off.
Yeah.
So, the depth, as you say, the layers, it's like lasagna, or like ogres have layers and onions have layers and tarot readings have layers. So it's interesting. I do still use reversals and jumpers. And if I'm feeling cautious, like maybe it's my arthritic hands, I will ask Brian to douse because he has a loyal following of groupies who ask, is Brian going to douse this week? So he literally has to bring the stuff out onto the table. And yeah, and it's interesting how many people. So I'm fine. Was that meant to be an upside down or a jumper? Was that jumper card supposed to be included? You know, I will ask, is this reversal really a true reversal or just the way I, got it? So that's interesting. All right, ask me a question.
Okay, let me get my list. Sure. Okay.
Not trying to be bossy, I'm just old. I forget.
Well, this is a two-way thing, right?
Yeah.
So when you are doing readings, like say a private reading for somebody, okay, is there a specific spread that you always like to use, or is it depend on the type of reading you're doing? Can you talk about that a little bit?
When I teach, let me just jump to that. I give my students all kinds of traditional spreads. I, for one, am not a lover of the Celtic cross, never was. I've never done it, and that's so popular. In fact, it turned me off doing spreads because it forces you to talk about what the meaning of that position is rather than the flow of the story that's created.
Yeah.
So for me, I typically lay out 7 cards that are tarot, and then whatever decks I myself douse or am called or spirit speaks to, I will pull out the oracles that seem to match the vibe, because I do ceremony the night before. It's a very small ceremony, but I'm preparing so that, when I go into the sleep state, spirit can connect about the reading. And then I typically use the same spread that I use on camera from years and years and years and years of doing this. I mean, it's over 50 years since I started getting paid for doing readings. But sometimes when I'm having a channeling session, spirit wants cards. So I'll do the channeling and then stop it and pull the cards out in the same 7 and 7. And what tends to happen with that is I need to have decks that give me the astrological background, so that helps form a timeline. The old card readers would say if you're getting a 4, it's 4 days, 4 weeks, 4 months, 4 years. I find spirits that work with me don't go beyond about 3 years because there's free will choice, right? Every action or every choice we make alters the direction. So reading way far in the future doesn't seem to be what they want to do. So I stopped going by the numbers on the cards and go more by the astrological. From this point, is it starting in Taurus? And I'll get Brian to douse so that I'm getting objective information. Is it from Taurus to, I don't know, Pisces, like Taurus 2024 to Pisces 2025? And if I get a no, it's not Pisces 2025 because that's what the card is, I'll say, is it Pisces 2026? And we get involved, and we actually, if there's multiple astrological cards, we're looking at activities hitting in a certain space. So I find that the method that I've got with the 7 + 7 and sometimes the odd extra card for some other reason seems to really work for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, for myself, I don't follow really any specific spread either. I tend to just start, turning cards over unless I have some jumpers. They always come out first. It just depends. And then even as I'm reading, sometimes I'll feel intuitively I need to spread like groups of cards apart from each other because the energies are different. If it's a court card, sometimes I'll have to am like, nope, this is a specific person. It's not you. It's somebody in your life. Or I'll put, it just depends intuitively how they come together. And I don't have a specific number of cards that I turn over. I just, again, intuitively I allow the story to open and unfold and go in whatever direction it needs to assist the sitter in whatever they need at that time. And then I'll just, again, know when we come to the end of it. Now, in my experience, I usually can tell it's usually roughly around the same amount of cards. I've never counted, and and I don't think it's the right way or the wrong way, but I think it's each of us has our journey as readers, and it's evolving. And I'm not saying that I might do this forever, but this is kind of where I've developed to now, and it might change, over the years. But it just, I feel like the specific spreads can be limiting on what needs to come through, as you said, because it can force, you have a question or whatever that placement of the card represents, and that kind of forces, but in that forcing, you're limiting the scope of the energy and information that could come through. So I like it to be a little bit more organic, I guess.
So there are card systems like Lenormand with the Grand Tableau that uses all of the cards sitting on the houses that are the same cards but in their order. And Kipper, I'm thinking of those two. I like both systems, but I find that having to read all of those cards, I am forced into a structure that doesn't necessarily work for me, and I can lose the depth in a private reading when I'm going on for nearly 2 hours.
Yeah, and that's the other aspect of it too. Yeah, if you have too many cards, you're hitting on too much, and it's nice to go back to the cards and feel into if there's any more information that it has to come out. So that's pretty cool. So if somebody's wanting to learn tarot or get into deepening their understanding of it, do you have any recommendations on how to go about that?
Well, there are some really, really good books that will help a person who doesn't want to get into a class situation where they feel they have to keep up with the other students. And I know when I'm teaching, I make those lists of books available, and perhaps I can put a few at the end of have Brian put it into the video information. But Benabel Wen is a great historical figure, and I believe her name is Teresa Chang. Vincent Petici, he just passed away. He has some wonderful, very simple books with all the cards' potential meanings. I noticed a lot of readers in his age range. Like, I think he turned 70 last December, and he's just passed. But a lot of us use the Marseille because we don't want the pictures, other than the court cards and the majors, because that limits the information that comes. And so people say, you mean there's more than one meaning for a card? And yeah, that's where I find Rider-Waite-Smith. So I try to get students to see the flow between the different types that I showed at the beginning. There's good teachers and there's bad teachers, but classes are helpful because you've got individuals to work off of who are at the same level you are. So, but it can't be just at class, and there's no 10 minutes to learn tarot. I'm sorry. I'm still learning tarot 52 or 3 years later.
It's a rabbit hole.
It is a rabbit hole. So there are classes. Find reputable classes, perhaps in a community where you can see that the person teaching is teaching them on a regular rotation, and they obviously are still in business doing it if they're a good teacher. There are online classes. There are good teachers who teach online. But I think resource books help to understand the history and the meanings. That would be my overarching answer to your question.
Yeah, I know for me with when I first started learning tarot 7 years ago, I felt I was so overwhelmed with, the suits and the major arcana versus the minor arcana and trying to keep it all separate. Like I was just totally overwhelmed, and I did, look into some books, but I was still struggling. So what really helped me was taking a class, and I did an online class, and that really broke it down for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel really blessed that, I found a teacher online that worked well for me, and it just really allowed me to grasp basic concepts and get past that overwhelm. And then there was the integration, and then I found that I was able to integrate it. I probably was already, but it just started to, I was aware of the integration then, and felt like, okay, I think I can do this. And then starting a self-practice every day too, just pulling cards for myself, journaling, sitting with the card, feeling into it, journaling it, to just build that information in the subconscious. Yeah.
What do you think about adding other aspects that historically were incorporated in tarot specifically, like astrology or like the Kabbalah? Do you find that exciting?
I like that it can add another dimension to readings and make them more interesting. I am still like totally newbie in adding that to my readings. I'm just dabbling now in the astrology part. Again, it's another rabbit hole, and it's very fascinating. I find it can be very in my experience, my limited experience with it, it can really like confirm for the sitter or myself whom it is being represented, say by a court card. If it's a King of Cups, and I'm feeling into the energy, and then oh, it's that particular sign, and so it does help. But apart from that, like I said, I'm just barely dabbling in it. So, but I do find when it does come in, it's helpful.
Okay.
Yeah. How about you?
I love the astrology. I've always done charts just privately in the background. I've done them for a few people. And I follow Dr. Michael Lennox on Instagram, and
he's good.
And get his newsletter. There are others like Deborah Silverman and Yasmin Boland. There are people whose traditions I like. But I also, like in my readings, I love the indigenous astrology. So I bring both into play in the readings, because I find the focuses or the foci of each complement each other. And part of my mission, as it is with Brian, is to bring the indigenous traditions around the moon cycle. So there's 13 indigenous moon cycles and 12 astrological houses. So we get to see the blending of the two. It just makes it more open. Something that I wanted to jump into while I think of it, that the astrology made me, my head jump to. Do you see cartomancy as more woo-woo, or more parapsychological, or more archetypal? I'm thinking of Carl Jung when I think of the tarot representing archetypes, because where I'm going is a lot of psychologists and professional people in counseling will use tarot and oracle in the practice to help people understand the archetype behind what they're doing.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. Before I jumped into this world of, oracle cards and tarot cards, I would have said it was totally woo-woo. but the more I go into it and learn and experience it, it to me is so psychological, and it makes sense and very much associated with the archetypes and the roles we play and the cycles in our lives. And yeah, that's so I find it is, it's like a mirror. It's reflecting back what we're experiencing. And for anybody coming to the cards for direction or confirmation, I think that it's only reflecting what we already know, but we're not trusting within ourselves. So I think it's a wonderful tool.
Yeah, I was glad I went to university when I did, because I came in as an Indigenous woman, afraid to be out in the world because my Indigenous father was in residential school, and my mother, who I found out this past year was Indigenous, didn't want to have anything to do with it and was involved in a traditional church. But I went through my degree years with both the psychology and parapsychology, and it was focusing on Jung and archetypes, and he was a spiritualist. So I got the ancestor stuff from culture and heritage, and I got the connection with spirit, and Jung made it okay for me. And so one of the earliest decks I ever got was his deck, the Jung Tarot, and then treatises by authors talking about Jung's perspective on the spiritual. Because after university, I did the mediumship training with the Spiritualist Church, became an ordained and licensed spiritualist minister. So the authentic nature of this took it way away from the woo-woo for me, and made it very normal. And because I needed to understand that what I was experiencing was not going to bring castigation, and ostracism, because it was part of my life, and it was going to be whether I wanted it to be or not. So it's been a fabulous tool all these years to work into counseling. I love it. Yeah. It's great for myself and my own, working through what archetype am I sitting in when I think these thoughts about this issue,
Yeah.
and getting some focus from my higher self on that through the cards.
So tell me, when you're choosing decks, what helps you decide on a deck for you? What qualities or energies do you look for? Or maybe just like a historic?
I love art. The art has to speak to me. If it looks like cartoons or manga or something that doesn't resonate with me, I love the stuff of Rasuli, and I can think of other artists who have created decks where you can feel the energetic flow, because colors reflect in our chakras, they reflect in our fields. And because I see the auric field and the corona discharge off of a deck, if it's flat and a dead looking deck, without even looking at the cards, first of all, I think, can I energize this? If I can't energize it, and the art doesn't speak to me, it never wakes up for me. Now, I must, I don't drink, but, kind of wonder why I got the gummy worm tarot, but, that was just a bit of silly fun, because that's obviously very cartoony. But there are a lot of decks where I think, as I have matured, and hopefully I have matured, the art has to really resonate with me, so I'm careful to check. Now, the historic decks, like this this tarot matinee, is a Marseille deck, and all the artists followed this very classic Marseille structure, and they have what we call pip cards. So the pip cards This is an Yves Renault deck. Let me find a quick pip card. So here's the Ace of Cups. It's just a cup. The Two of Cups. So these are pips. There are no art stories on the card to influence how I read subconsciously. And that's important. Once I learned the many readings and possible variables for the cards, and Vincent Petici made the nicest drawings of that, I have to say, in the last few years, and those books have been only available in the last 5 years. Once I got those working with cards, I got those images in my head and in my vocabulary, so to speak. It didn't matter to me whether there was a picture on the card or not. I found that the one that I have grown away from the most, though, is Rider-Waite-Smith. Unfortunately, the pictures and the numerology, which is very important to me, as much or more than the astrology, the numerology meanings have to be consistent across all of the minors, and they're not. And I find that people get locked into reading the Three of Swords as heartbreak, when in fact, in a numerological meaning, and historically, it was expansive wisdom and growth, the solving of problems. Very different meaning, you know, and maybe that's the meaning that fits the reading in front of me, and maybe the reading in front of me, maybe it is heartbreak, but I have to look then at the context. So if in my growth I learn the many meanings of the cards, and it is easy. I find numerology helps with that. You know, learning what each of the numbers means.
Yes, that does help.
So that's a very long answer to your question.
For me, I like really decent cardstock. Just going into the basic qualities of the actual physical medium.
Yep.
Not too flimsy, or that's going to get damaged, and it has to have a little weight to it, but not too thick. A nice slip, so when you're shuffling, they slide easily. And a size is important too. If it's too big and I can't easily shuffle it, it's clunky, and that should be the least of my worries when I'm shuffling.
Exactly.
I just want to be able to do it. And then as far as the artwork and that, I'm just opening my bag here. So this is this is Art Nouveau, right?
Nouveau,
Art Nouveau. So this is based on Rider-Waite.
Show them to the camera.
Yeah, and so this one really spoke to me because I love the gold finishing on it, and it was pretty. I just thought, this is so pretty. I really like it, and
it resonates.
Yeah, it resonates, and that's the other part too. Energetically, like I have to like the artwork, and energetically, I see if I can connect with it, and yeah, if it feels like alive and there's energy moving there, then definitely. And other times, you know, there'll be nothing. And so if that's the case, sometimes I pick up decks and I'll feel a connection for a while, and then I grow, or there's a shift or change or something, so I have to set it down, and then I'll be drawn to another one. So it changes and evolves all the time, but the basic stuff is, in the process of picking it, connection, physically attractive, which is kind of that part of that connection, I think, and then the shuffling the cardstock, and so,
good.
Yeah.
Well, do you think we've covered this?
I think hopefully, if anybody's there still watching, thanks for hanging out with us.
Yeah, and I was going to pull a couple cards for your trip tomorrow, but I think I'll wait and do that and use the gummy worm tarot, and that'll help.
Okay. I'm headed back home tomorrow, so.
That's right, back to BC.
Yeah.
So if you want information about how to contact Jennifer, as she said, she is online, but also by all means throw a comment on the video, and I can PM you that information. And if you're interested in information about classes or anything, you can also get in touch with us. Leave us a comment. I always answer everybody's comments, and we thank you for your time. So, Miigwech, and thanks from Brian over there, and have a good one.